to hear more about solutions and the opportunities when it comes to climate action. And for that, I welcome, of course, two virtual guests here at the Petersberg Climate Dialogue. With us is Mathias Cormann, the OECD Secretary General, and Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator. I hope you can hear us well. Greetings from Berlin.
We can hear you well.
Hello, and good morning, of course, to New York or wherever you're based. We also have now in the next conversation, Joe Tyndall, the OECD Director for the Environment. So please join me here also on stage. And we have the UNDP Global Director of Climate Change, Casey Flynn, also with us. These are two of your seats, so please join me here on stage. And for this conversation, we also be joined by Selwyn Hart, Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Climate Action and Just Transition. And for the tough questions, I hand over to Jennifer Morgan.
Thank you, and a huge thank you to Johan Rockström, who managed in 15 minutes, I think, to give us a picture of what's at stake. And now, you know, we heard this morning we wanted to have science and economics really at the core of our discussion. And so I'm very pleased that we have these live virtual inputs from the OECD Secretary General, Mathias Cormann, and the UNDP Administrator, Achim Steiner. We're very thankful to both of you. We know you're in other meetings, that you've joined us here virtually. We're going to get right to it. Mr. Cormann, I'll give you the floor first. I know you have a hard stop at 2, so if you disappear, we know what's going on. But thank you for being here, and over to you, Mr. Cormann. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. And, good afternoon, everyone. And it's great to be here with my good friend and valued colleague, Achim Steiner from the UNDP, and indeed also my colleague here at the OECD, Joe Tyndall. So thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts on nationally determined contributions and their role in climate and economic policy. I mean, as you know, at the OECD, we are fully committed to help secure the global net zero by 2050. And what we bring to the table are our multidisciplinary capabilities, helping to deliver better policies through our data and information sharing, our evidence-based mutual learning and advice, the development of best practices and standards, but also by providing a platform for inclusive multilateral dialogue to help facilitate a better and more effective international cooperation. And this includes supporting governments with the design of their nationally determined contributions, the foundation for achieving our shared climate goals. Today, we are presenting the highlights of an OECD UN Development Programme report, which shows how ambitious nationally determined contributions, if underpinned by robust implementation and investment plans, can provide economic opportunities, unlock investment, and indeed support sustainable development and growth. The analysis that we're releasing today shows how proactive climate action reduces economic risks, protects against systemic shocks, and safeguards long-term prosperity. In fact, we estimate that by helping to reduce climate-related damages, strengthening nationally determined contributions could increase global GDP by up to 13% over the next 75 years. The benefits are not limited, of course, to economic growth. Our analysis also highlights the potential of climate mitigation policies to advance other important national public policy priorities, including in relation to public health, reliable access to energy, as well as poverty reduction. Joe Tyndall, our Director for Environment, will provide further details of this analysis in her presentation. But to help realize these benefits, the OECD is supporting countries in developing and implementing nationally determined contributions for 2025 that are both ambitious as well as achievable. First, by tracking the ambition and implementation of current climate commitments. Indeed, our 2024 Climate Action Monitor shows that current nationally determined contributions amount to a collective reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of 14% by 2030 compared to 2022 levels, which is well below the estimated 43% in emissions reduction that is required to keep global temperature increases below 2 degrees Celsius, consistent with the Paris Agreement. And data from our climate actions and policies measurement framework, which measures the stringency of climate policies across 52 economies, also shows the need to accelerate implementation of commitments. Environmental policy stringency increased by only 1% in 2022 and 2% in 2023, compared to an average 10% annual increase between 2010 and 2021. Second, we provide policy advice to ensure that nationally determined contributions are financially viable and effective in stimulating investment. The OECD IEA, a climate change expert group analysis, shows that nationally determined contributions currently lack the sufficient information on how they will be delivered, which means that investors in the private sector don't have the necessary certainty in order to commit the necessary financing. And to address this challenge, we recommend breaking down nationally determined contributions to a more granular sectoral level with more detailed costings of investment needs and financing strategies, and building confidence that nationally determined contributions are achievable by providing detailed information on supporting legislation and regulations, and by ensuring stronger coordination across whole of government, so that nationally determined contributions are no longer developed in an isolated way by the Ministry of the Environment or Climate Change, but are anchored in overall national development and economic growth strategies. Third, by helping to ensure national efforts are globally more effective and better coordinated through our inclusive forum on carbon mitigation approaches. The OECD's IFCMA, as it's called in short, is designed to help optimize the global emissions reduction impact of emissions reduction efforts in individual countries around the world through better data and information sharing about the comparative effectiveness of different carbon mitigation approaches undertaken around the world, through evidence-based mutual learning and advice on policy best practice, and through that inclusive multilateral dialogue involving advanced, emerging and developing economies. And the aim here being to facilitate more coherent and better coordinated mitigation policies across countries with a view to maximize positive cross-border spillover effects through shared innovation, cost savings, and shared benefits from the climate transition, and at the same time avoiding negative cross-border spillovers such as carbon leakage or trade distortions that could come from different policy approaches in different jurisdictions. We're working towards developing an IFCMA database of mitigation policies and an assessment of the comparative emissions reduction impacts by the end of this year. And that data and analysis will help to identify further opportunities to make better decisions and to further enhance the impact of nationally determined contributions. So in conclusion, there's a great deal to do to ensure that nationally determined contributions take us to where we need to be in terms of progress towards our shared climate goals. And here at the OECD and the UNDP working together, we believe that we do have the tools, the data and the analysis to help countries get there and to help ensure we do it in a way that delivers economic benefits as well as achieving the climate objectives we need the world to achieve. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and I hope I didn't take too long.
Thank you very much, Mathias. Economic benefits and growth and climate action. Achim Steiner, UNDP has also been involved in this report, but also, of course, across the board on development. What are your thoughts on this? If I can hand over, I think you're in Istanbul, so thank you also for joining us.
I am indeed, and guten Tag to Berlin. Boa tarde, mio amigo Andrea Correlago. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. And Mathias, thank you for laying out so clearly, first of all, something that the OECD is associated with, which is clarity in analysis in data and empirical research when it comes to pathways for economies. And us joining forces as OECD and UNDP, in a sense, provides us with a 360-degree perspective, if you want, on where we are in this long-standing debate about the economy and climate change action. And I'm very grateful that we actually listened to Johan just now, because the imperative to act, I think that argument has long been closed. The ability to act is one that continues to be let's say, presented with a degree of ambiguity and more often also in certain quarters with a degree of, let's say, skepticism and even an attempt to perhaps reverse the level of ambition that we have already agreed on. So the kind of glimpse onto a report that in its full form we will present in a few weeks' time, OECD and UNDP have really tried to not hypothesize and only model, but actually draw on the evidence that is now available across literally dozens of economies across the globe. And the basic question that we wanted to examine, as Mathias already alluded, can we envisage pathways where actually economic growth, GDP growth and development thrive because there are climate action investments? And I think, as you already heard from Mathias just now, to those who want to continue to sow doubts, there will always be certain things we don't know for sure. But the overwhelming evidence that we now have available is that, first of all, we are not regressing if we invest in climate transitions. Secondly, we actually see a modest increase in GDP growth that may look small at first from the point of view of incremental. But let's just assume for a moment, if you do that over the next 20 to 25 years or even to the end of the century, you're beginning to talk about growth rates that translate into literally billions and billions of additional economic investments and also returns on investments. The report estimates that by 2050, high-income countries will see more than a 60% increase in GDP per capita growth, while low-income countries, and this is a very important message and not one that we should simply be taking for granted because that was not always as evident in recent decades, while low-income countries could experience a remarkable 124% rise from 2025 levels. This is extremely important because clearly the transitions are disruptive. And we know that in the more developed economies, the legacy transition is immensely complex and difficult and certainly unsettling. In many developing countries, it is the ability to actually invest in the basic infrastructure that would allow these transitions in energy systems that remain a major challenge. And where this analysis leads us to is that actually not only is there a macroeconomic return on investment, for instance, the estimates also show that for extreme poverty, we would estimate with a current ambitious level of NDC investment, 175 million people could be lifted out of extreme poverty globally, not in 2050, by decade's end. These are immensely powerful figures, and they are not imagined scenarios. They are essentially derived from assuming that there are levels of investment, that there are very smart transition strategies, and that we are also able to address what remains an extremely frustrating and, let's say, basic reality. Access to finance to enable these transitions to happen is simply not materializing, particularly not for least developed countries, for low-income economies, and therefore we do need to look at how that $2 trillion economy in renewables that our colleagues in the IEA estimate last year out of a $3 trillion economy investment in the energy sector can actually become a $3 trillion economy of investments for every country. And for that, there is something very important here, which is not so much about the science of climate change nor the economic metrics. It's about a fundamental principle, collaboration. And for collaboration to succeed, we cannot only appeal to one another as we have done for many years, we also have to create the conditions for collaboration to succeed. One of them is clearly the de-risking of finance, the attraction of financial capital and private sector investment, but also NDCs. NDCs have proven to be a success story, despite many of, let's say, those who left Paris wondering whether they would ever translate into something meaningful. And let's be clear, for most of this period, they have been ways of articulating policy intentions. But increasingly, we are seeing them graduate from policy intentions to being integral to national development planning, national investment strategies, and above all, providing also the international community, the well over 190 nations that have signed up to the Paris Agreement, with a foundation upon which to build trust in one another and also a form of mutual accountability that, some are not simply sitting on the sidelines while others are leaning forward. To be able to support those NDCs, as you know, UNDP has in recent years been a center of gravity within the United Nations family, and again at the Secretary General's request, very much part of the offer to countries right now to prepare the next generation of NDCs. And I want to urge you that if you are sometimes perhaps wondering whether coming to Belém with an NDC may be not a good idea, hedging or not having an NDC, I think would be a great setback for the foundations upon which we need to build progress and trust and the ability to move forwards. To have an ambitious NDC will be critical, because otherwise the divergence between where science tells us we need to be and where our economies are reflecting where we are simply becomes no longer credible. So far, the Paris Agreement is a success story, notwithstanding many of the criticisms that arise when you design something for 8 billion citizens almost today, having to synchronize their actions under extremely different and differing conditions. Let me end by just noting that in the way that we are thinking forward right now, it is not only GDP growth, and again, Johan, at the end of your presentation, you made a quick reference to it. We're actually talking about losing perhaps up to a third of our GDP by in this century, if we do not have these NDCs driving the kinds of investments and transitions that are envisaged. So again, coming back to collaboration, the current divestment, the current defunding of some of the fundamental tenets of international collaboration and climate financing, but also development cooperation, they may be, and hopefully will only be, short-term signals of perhaps developments in domestic political terms. Leaving them undiscussed will actually be a major problem, because our ability to collectively invest, and this is not homing in only on public finance, fundamental to private finance, to investments, particularly in developing economies, is a public finance platform on which the multiples of private sector investment can succeed. So NDCs are a central piece of maintaining the Paris Agreement's integrity, but also to be able to mobilize the kind of financing that is needed, especially if we succeed in getting the NDCs to being integral to national development plans, national investment strategies, and again, our work as UNDP with over 90 countries on the integrated national financing frameworks, the NDC support program, all these are offers to enable countries to arrive in Belém with NDCs that are not meant to be an instrument or expression for compliance. They're actually a projection from a national sovereignty point of view of how to think about the future of development, rooted in a nation's reality, including its politics and economics, but acknowledging that without the rest of the world coming together, all of this may just be theory. Thank you so much for inviting us today. And again, I want to thank Mathias. It's been an extremely constructive and productive collaboration. I hope we have all helped you to have more evidence as you also return home to have these very intense discussions over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Achim. And I think having you here with Mathias Cormann to share this, I mean, to let colleagues know, the reason why we commissioned this report was because of last year's PCD discussion, where we talked about the barriers, the questions that are the economics that we all face at home, the financing, et cetera. And therefore we thought, let's bring in some numbers. Let's bring in some expertise from two of the top world organizations on this. And because we need to both understand the socioeconomics of this, and we also need to understand better the costs of inaction. And so we wanted to ask, first, thank you for the teams who delivered this at record speed. And there'll be the full report, and you have the short version on your chairs. But if I could hand over first to you, Joe, to give a little bit more depth, just to give everyone here a set of kind of understanding. We'll then have some quick interventions. I'm going to try and make that a dialogue. There's lots of case studies in this as well. You will find your countries, some of your countries, they couldn't put everyone in. So, so to make it quite practical. Joe, over to you.
Just the microphone.
Thank you, Jennifer, and it's a real honour to be here today. Hopefully, somebody can load the. We've just got a couple of PowerPoint slides to accompany what I'm going to say, but I think there were two reasons we we thought about when we started this report. One was that there is a really common understanding that climate action is being framed as a trade-off, something that comes at an economic cost. And the second thing was that in the past, to some extent, the NDC exercise has been a bit of a tick box one, something you have to do. So let's put some numbers in and get it in there. So we wanted to try and help a way forward there. And the OECD and UNDP report we're launching today provides a clear message. Stronger climate policies drive economic efficiency and innovation. We've put together an enhanced NDC scenario that shows that cleaner technologies and lower energy costs are going to boost productivity and competitiveness. Businesses investing in energy efficiency stand to benefit from reduced costs and stronger market positions. So the graph here, it does depict what both Mathias and Achim mentioned, a net positive GDP impact by 2040 under that enhanced NDC scenario compared with the growth projections under current policies. Now, realizing these gains, of course, isn't automatic. Uncertainty is the enemy of investment. And we heard a lot about investment and financing this morning. Without clear policy direction, investor confidence weakens, private capital hesitates, and global GDP could decline, as Achim mentioned, by 0.75% as early as 2030. NDCs provide the long-term policy certainty, ensuring that markets have the confidence to invest in sustainable growth. Beyond GDP, a more ambitious pathway transforms the way economies function. Today, the world emits 0.34 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per dollar of economic output. Under an enhanced NDC scenario, this would be cut by more than half to 0.14 kilograms by 2040. A more efficient global economy is a real win-win for the climate and at the same time ensuring we're doing more with less, reducing waste and creating new opportunities for growth and resilience. Jennifer mentioned that the economic case for climate ambition gets even stronger over the long term. Jennifer mentioned the cost of inaction, and we did do some modelling of that. It's hard to predict, hence the bars on this graph, but it is staggering. And by 2100, avoided damages could be worth up to 78 times the cost of Fukushima, which has been the most expensive natural disaster in history. Proactive climate action reduces systemic risks and protects long-term prosperity. So when countries integrate, and integrate is a truly important word, integrate climate targets with their national development strategies, it creates a basis to realise significant benefits. Again, some of these co-benefits have already been mentioned by Mathias and Achim. Stronger climate policies have immediate and tangible co-benefits. And in 2019, fossil fuel use contributed to 4.2 million premature deaths from air pollution, 89% of which occurred in low and middle income countries. So investing in clean energy and sustainable urban planning also saves lives. That said, we know this is not a simple proposition and that economic transitions are disruptive. As we move towards net zero economies, some sectors and some communities will need targeted support. Now, the decline of coal mining in Europe or the automation of manufacturing have shown that these major shifts can spur innovation and renewal, but only with the right policies in place. And that means governments must invest in reskilling programs, economic diversification, and social protections to ensure a just transition. So how do we deliver the growth and development benefits identified in our economic modelling? Climate ambitions, of course, have to be translated into action, and that means building high-level political ownership at the country level, driving coherent policies across national, sectoral and local levels, securing stakeholder buy-in, building relationships with key implementing factors and mobilising financing from a variety of sources. So just to conclude, the next round of NDCs is the opportunity to do this through 5 collaborative actions. I would sum them up as alignment, integration, and engagement. So first, align the incentives between finance, economic, and climate ministers to build that high-level and centralised political leadership. It has to be embedded with ministries of finance and local governments, fully aligned and engaged to ensure that the policies are coordinated and investment can be mobilised. Second, align NDCs with national development priorities. Climate targets have to be integrated into those strategies, into economic planning and policy frameworks to maximise impact and institutional buy-in. Third, it's really important to engage the private sector early. NDCs should signal clear investment opportunities backed by strong regulatory frameworks and robust project pipelines to attract private capital. Predictable carbon pricing or clear renewable energy targets are the sort of things that will drive investment in low carbon technologies and give long-term policy direction. The fourth point is to strengthen financial institutions, equipping domestic and international financial institutions with the right tools, investments, and expertise to scale up climate finance, including through things like green bonds and sustainability-linked finance. And finally, of course, ensuring a just transition, engaging affected stakeholders early, designing equitable policies, and addressing social impacts to build public support. We've got to have public support for this and ensure long-term sustainability. So this report is our recipe for effective climate action, sustained economic growth, and building social resilience. It provides evidence that with smart policies, strong governance, and targeted investment, climate ambition can be a catalyst for growth, innovation, and opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks very much, Joe. I'm sure many of the things that Joe just outlined are things that we're familiar in our own national discussions, and I hope that the study and the numbers, the analysis, the rich literature that you went through, the experiences. Also very pleased Cassie Flynn is here from UNDP. She'll join us in the conversation. But first, I want to hand it over to you, Selwyn Hart. You've had many conversations with many countries. You have vast experience on this. Can you share a few thoughts with this esteemed group on what are you seeing things? How should we move forward?
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Anatoni, Lillian, Joe, Cassie, Achim, and the other colleagues. It's really great to see all of you. And I just want to take a step back a bit. And Professor Rockstrom's framing of where we are really was extremely sobering. And it comes, as he said, a week after the WMO's report. And the reality, every single indicator, climate indicator in that report, as well as Professor Rockstrom's really great presentation, showed that we're flashing red. Sea surface temperature, temperature rise, glacier melting, sea level, the pace of sea level rise, and climate-related displacements. And these impacts are being felt disproportionately in the global south, in places where the places where that were least responsible for causing the climate crisis. So our international efforts must embed equity and solidarity firmly within whatever global response we frame over the course of this year. So as we look at the nationally determined contributions and the NDCs, yes, we need, and I fully subscribe to everything that was just said on the economic benefits of these NDCs and the economic benefits of the transition. But as we know, since Paris, we've made great progress, but it's largely been a tale of two transitions. A transition that is accelerating in certain places and a transition that's now getting off the ground in many developing and emerging economies. And yes, we need strong domestic policies. We need countries to reform the policy and regulatory framework. When one looks, for example, at subsidy reform, countries are spending 9 times more to make fossil fuels cheaper than they are on the clean alternatives. So yes, the actions must be taken urgently at the domestic level, and what countries embed in their NDCs will be a great signal to investors and to markets. But all of this needs to be accompanied by enabling conditions at the international level. At a time when multilateralism is under threat, as we know, at a time of global divisions, now is not the time to retreat from multilateralism. Now is not the time to retreat from solidarity, because a lot of this cannot be done simply by developing and emerging economies taking action, just actions at home. Yes, we can do it, but for most developing countries, they still require favorable international conditions at the international level. So yes, we will continue to push countries to do what they need to do, but I think collectively we need to work to address many of the challenges that the developing countries face. The good news is we more or less know what we need to do, and we more or less have the tools at our disposal to address them. We know that the high cost of capital is a major constraint facing many in the developing world. And we know that many countries will need to get their house in order. But on the other hand, we need to make finance that is more accessible and affordable to the majority of developing countries. And we know what are some of the tools. Guarantees, we've seen many innovative deals being put on the table. One was done in Barbados recently to convert debt. So we need to deploy these tools at pace and scale. So my central message, yes, we push everyone to signal more, but I think over the course of this year, let's work together to help create favorable international conditions so that countries that are ambitious will be rewarded with the finance and the technology that they need to accelerate the pace of the transition. And we can truly show that the Paris Agreement is working, and we can launch in Berlin this decade of acceleration of implementation.
Thank you, Selwyn.